Segment 6, the Samnite Wars 343–9 OBCE. Between 343 BCE and 290 BCE, military activity involving Rome, the Samnites, and numerous other communities occurred across central and southern Italy. Ancient sources describe this period through a sequence of conflicts commonly known as the Samnite Wars. The principal literary accounts survive in works written centuries after the events, most notably those of Livy. Archaeological evidence, inscriptions, settlement patterns, and topographical studies provide additional information. The Samnites were not a single city-state. They occupied a mountainous region of the central and southern Apennines and were organized through several related tribal communities. Ancient sources commonly identify major Samnite groups, including the Pentri, Caudine, Hirpini, and Caraceni. During the 4th century BCE, Rome administered territory in Latium and maintained relations with neighboring communities through diplomacy, alliances, military operations, and settlement activity. Numerous independent states and peoples remained active throughout Italy. Political conditions varied across regions, and military alliances changed over time. In 343 BCE, ancient sources record the beginning of hostilities traditionally identified as the First Samnite War. The surviving literary tradition associates the conflict with the Campanian city of Capua. Campania occupied fertile territory south of Latium. The region contained important agricultural land, urban settlements, and routes connecting different parts of Italy. Ancient accounts describe diplomatic exchanges involving Capua, Rome, and the Samnites. The details preserved in later sources cannot always be independently verified. The surviving evidence nevertheless indicates military operations involving Rome and Samnite forces during this period. Campaigns occurred across territories connecting Latium, Campania, and the central Apennines. Ancient sources describe several engagements during 343 BCE and 342 BCE. Reliable figures for troop numbers do not survive. The surviving narratives provide differing levels of detail regarding battlefield operations. Military activity continued, while diplomatic arrangements also remained under discussion. In 341 BCE, hostilities associated with the First Samnite War came to an end. Ancient sources describe an agreement between Rome and the Samnites. The surviving evidence does not preserve all terms with certainty. Military activity in Italy nevertheless continued through other conflicts involving neighboring communities. During the same period, relations between Rome and several Latin communities changed. The Latin League consisted of communities connected through shared language, geography, and historical associations. Political and military relationships among these communities varied according to circumstances. In 340 BCE, military conflict began between Rome and a coalition of Latin communities. Military operations continued throughout Latium during the Latin War. Campaigns occurred across roads, settlements, and agricultural territories. Military engagements took place between Roman and Latin forces. Roman forces secured victories recorded in surviving sources. Military operations continued across multiple campaigning seasons. In 338 BCE, the Latin War came to an end. Administrative arrangements followed the conclusion of the conflict. Latin communities entered differing political arrangements recorded in surviving sources. Citizenship, alliances, and local administration differed among communities. Rome continued expanding its administrative responsibilities throughout Latium. In 326 BCE, military operations began in the conflict known as the Second Samnite War. Campaigns extended across central and southern Italy. Mountain terrain shaped military movement. Valleys, ridges, and narrow routes formed part of the campaign environment. Military operations continued across multiple campaigning seasons. Alliances among Italian communities changed during the conflict. Military forces operated across several theaters simultaneously. In 321 BCE, Roman forces entered the Caudine Forks. Ancient sources describe Roman forces becoming enclosed within the pass. Surviving accounts record a negotiated surrender. Ancient sources preserve differing details concerning the event. Military operations resumed after the surrender episode. Campaigns continued across Samnium. Military activity extended over many years. Roman authorities continued recruiting military forces. Supplies accompanied campaigning armies, roads connected military positions and settlements. Administrative institutions continued operating throughout the conflict. Military operations remained active across multiple regions. Campaigns continued toward the closing years of the war. Military activity gradually declined. Negotiations followed continued campaigning. Administrative arrangements accompanied the conclusion of military operations. The Second Samnite War concluded in 300 for BCE. Military organization continued following the war. Roman authorities continued establishing colonies, roads connected expanding territories. Transportation supported military movement. Logistics remained essential during military operations. Communication moved along established road networks. Civic administration continued throughout wartime. Assemblies continued meeting according to established procedures. Religious observances continued alongside military activity. Agricultural production continued throughout Roman territory. Population movement connected towns, colonies, and military positions. Administrative responsibilities expanded with territorial growth. Public institutions coordinated military and civic activity. Military forces remained dependent upon citizen service. Existing institutions continued operating across expanding territory. Military organization remained active following the Second Samnite War. In 298 BCE, military operations began in the conflict known as the Third Samnite War. Multiple Italian communities participated in the conflict. Coalition forces operated across different regions. Campaigns developed on multiple fronts. Roman forces moved through valleys, plains, and mountain routes. Military operations continued across successive campaigning seasons. In 295 BCE, a major battle occurred at Sentinum. Ancient sources record extensive participation by opposing forces. The surviving evidence records a Roman victory. Military operations continued following the battle. Campaigns extended into neighboring territories. Administrative activity accompanied military operations. Military forces remained active until the conflict concluded. The Third Samnite War ended in 290 BCE. Military obligations continued after the conflict. Between 343 BCE and 290 BCE, Rome conducted military campaigns across central and southern Italy while continuing civic administration through established republican institutions. Colonies, roads, alliances, and military organization remained components of Roman administration. Political arrangements continued to develop following the conclusion of military operations. Public institutions continued directing civic, military, and territorial responsibilities. By 290 BCE, Rome administered a larger territory across the Italian peninsula while maintaining military forces, alliances, colonies, and transportation networks that supported continued operations.